Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores stories, science, and secrets from the world's brightest thought leaders for the curious at heart. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. We explore how behavioral science can improve your well-being, your relationships, and your organization by helping you find your groove.
Okay, Tim. Do you ever feel like social media has turned a bit toxic and maybe it's strayed from its original promise of creating meaningful connections and it's been hijacked by trolls and partisans? You ever think of that?
Yes, Captain Obvious. I would say that would be an understatement.
Oh my gosh. All right. I agree. Me too. Right.
Good. Okay.
There we go. You and I are of the age that we remember what life was like before the internet. Yes, kids, that makes us old. We know that. we understand. But there was this promise. I mean, at the beginning, that there was this promise the internet and social media in particular of what it could do to bring the world closer together. And somehow it feels that promise has only been partially successful.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kurt. You know, the internet has allowed us to make friends from around the world. Very cool. It's also ruined some of the friendships that I had at home. I mean, it's put us in rival camps and fostered misinformation and conspiracy theories. And frankly, that just makes life less enjoyable.
Yep, agree 100%, which is why I'm very happy to bring this episode to life, because we end up talking about ways that we can design social media and the internet to combat some of those negative aspects.
Yeah. So in this episode, we talked with John and Phillip and Philipp Lorenz-Spreen, who work at Prosocial Design Network. And their mission is to promote prosocial design, evidence-based design practices that bring out the very best in human nature online. Now, Dr. Philipp Lorenz-Spreen is a research scientist based in Berlin, Germany, and his work focuses on decision-making and finding ways to improve the online democratic process through environmental interventions. And John Phillip is a user experience and graphic designer based in New York City, and he co-founded the Prosocial Design Network with his colleague Joel Putnam in late 2019 in order to better explore ways that the web could be optimized for, guess what? Pro-social behaviors.
Yeah. And while there are no silver bullets in this effort, the conversation gave me hope. I don't know about you, Tim, but it gave me a little bit of hope,
Yeah,
and
very much so.
And it provides some insights for everyone on how to approach social media and the internet in general in a better way. Note that there are some background noise of babies and life happening in this episode, but that's how we roll here at Behavioral
It comes
Grooves.
and goes.
It comes and goes. So with that, we invite you to lift a glass of digital connection bliss and enjoy our conversation with John and Philipp.
Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, John Phillip and Philipp Lorenz-Spreen.
Hello.
We are glad to have you both here, and we want to start with a quick speed round. Tell us, both of you, John, let's start with you, John. What would be your preference, coffee or tea?
Coffee, 100% coffee.
100%. Yeah. I like how perfect that is. All right.
And in fact, one other quick note, specifically Maxwell House, mostly because they have, in their old commercials, they have the Wicked Witch of the West. Is it Edith Hamilton?
Yes.
Yeah, it's you got to go for that, not really France.
I love that's the reason why you choose Maxwell House. It's not like the taste or anything. It's like they had the Wicked Witch of the West. Yeah. I love it.
And Philip, I'm curious about you. Coffee or tea?
Absolutely coffee, very clearly. Maybe it's because we're living close to Italy. I don't know.
Yeah.
and so my guess is, are you more interested in an espresso or?
Definitely the Italian versions.
There you go.
Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if you had to vacation travel, and again, let's start with John. Do you travel with a set itinerary or no itinerary at all?
I would say a set itinerary. I really need to travel more, that's for sure. So
I don't remember that last vacation. Is that what that's?
Yeah, let's go with that one.
Okay.
Philip, how about you? Itinerary or no itinerary when you travel for fun?
No, I would say.
Oh, a man after my own heart there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and I love the fact that you two work together, collaborate together, and polar opposites in this particular aspect. That's great. Okay, this might be a little more focused on Philip. So, Philip, why don't you start? But John, I'm curious about your thoughts as well. Berlin or New York? Which has better food?
I can start. Unfortunately, I have not been to New York before, so I can't even tell you. I've been to Boston, and I have to say, I would even say a slight advantage for Boston.
You would?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay. John?
I mean, I'm the reverse situation yet again. I've yet to be to Berlin. I'm definitely open to it. But given that New York is New York, and I live near New York, I've lived in New York, and New York probably encapsulates Berlin in sort of its own way, I would have to say New York.
Okay.
It's interesting. I've eaten in both, and I think both are really they're distinct and good.
Fantastic.
So there you go.
If you want a good schnitzel, you got to be in Berlin.
That is true.
That's true.
Or Munich.
And if you want a good falafel or shawarma,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
then go to New York. Exactly.
Okay. Last of the speed round questions, and I will throw this open to whoever wants to answer it. Can we inoculate ourselves against misinformation online? Is that something that is even possible?
Maybe I can say something quickly on that.
Okay.
If it's possible, I would say yes, but I don't think it's the silver bullet.
So it's possible, but it probably is not likely that it is going to happen. Is that what I'm hearing?
It will happen. It won't protect us from all, but it will be a certain layer in such a kind of layer model, if you think about it, that will hold off at least part of it.
Okay. So it's a partial immunization as you're talking about. It's kind of getting there. It's gonna, you might still get the disease, but you're not going to get as sick. Is that kind of a bad metaphor for what we're talking about there?
I would rather say it will protect some people and others not so much. It's rather this heterogeneity of effects, you know.
Ooh.
And then and for others, other interventions will work. So that's what I mean. And there's this kind of idea of the layers, and at each layer you protect certain groups, and in the end everybody's protected.
All right,
that's fantastic.
And we asked that question because both of you are part of the Prosocial Network, and the Prosocial Network is a really cool concept. And I'm going to leave it up to you to talk about what the Prosocial Network is and what is its mission. So, John, if you want to take that one.
Well, just to clarify, it's Prosocial Design Network.
Sorry, thank you. Prosocial Design Network. I apologize for that.
Yeah, originally I think we were rolling with just calling it Prosocial Design, and then I was like, that's leaving it a bit of a cliffhanger. So ultimately,
fair enough.
And my co-founder and I, very early on, decided to switch it over to Network. We were discussing possibly doing Prosocial Design Alliance, which would be PDA, like Public Displays of Affection.
Yeah,
that's a bit much, but. No. So with the Prosocial Design Network, we're looking at ways that the web can be redesigned so as to promote prosocial behaviors online, mostly through design. A good way to think about it is that, and this is sort of an analogy I use a lot, is when it comes to, let's take the example of a plane, for instance, and you're flying a plane, or if you're a pilot, let's say, and you're flying a plane, of course, there are all sorts of tools and instruments that help you gauge where you are in relation to other people. And if you didn't have all those tools and metrics to gauge where you are, the plane would crash. There's just no question about it. In the case of social media, a lot of those cues aren't there. And there's I believe it's an old survey from like 2012, so it could be outdated, but it was suggesting that something like 80% of text messages are likely to miscommunication. So perhaps that's improved over time, not likely. But that's all to say, is it any surprise, given the status quo where things are with social media, everything being a dumpster fire, conversations literally crashing and burning, that there might be some connection there, that maybe we need more of those sort of cues to be like, okay, all these subtle nonverbal cues that we get from other people, where are those in a digital interface? And how can we help generate those? How can we sort of pull those in using all the available scientific literature that's out there? And to that end, a lot of that involves looking at, for our part, we look at research that's already been done in this space and kind of curating all of that to see, okay, where are the bright spots? Where are things going well in social networks with regards to countering disinformation, misinformation, polarization, all those issues. And not so much looking at where things have gone wrong, but where things have gone right and kind of the bright spots in the data. So that's a big part of our mission, is curating that and then making it actionable for designers. So in that regard, right now, a lot of that is just sort of documenting what has worked and showcasing it. Down the line, it would be fantastic for us to have a component library, almost like what you might have on a service like Figma or Miro or something like that, where you can just take these designs and then download them for your own product use. And then going on from there, finding ways to, if not, well, that's more of a conversation for later, figuring out if companies know this data and know how to make it work or help improve conversations, how do you make a compelling case to those companies? But that's very much further down the line. Right now, we're focused more on curating all the best practices that are out there.
If you could, would you want to re-engineer, so to speak, the World Wide Web?
It depends. I would say a big part of it in the design interface side of things, I would say absolutely. I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. Mm-hmm. A good analogy I like to point to is sort of the successes that have come about with accessibility and design, and how previously, before accessibility standards were really promulgated and put out there, there wasn't a way to account for color blindness in design. If someone was colorblind and they're an interface that's not coherent to them, best of luck to you. But that said, through regulations and in some cases some legal actions that took place, now we have a system where it's like you have to design to this standard to help your users navigate the site. And so I guess the question that our work raises is it out of the question to pose that for social interactions, and especially since there's so much at stake. I mean, you could even argue that democracy's at stake with a lot of this stuff. So making sure we get that right, making sure that whatever products are getting put out there that have a social component, are we ensuring that the users are empowered to fully understand one another as appropriate? Of course, you don't want anything.
Philip, did you want to jump in on that?
No, I'm sorry. I think this was an absolutely great overview. And what John just said is that, empowering people to understand each other in the best possible way online, whenever an app or a platform has a social component, I think that's the essence. That's really cool. Yeah. Very well described.
So you talk about this idea that there's an importance to this idea that even democracy might be on the line. Can you dig into that a little bit deeper? Why is this so important? We've had conversations with people for millennia, and people have misinformed others for that entire time. What makes this piece ring a little bit louder for you guys?
Can I speak to that quickly? Because I just wrote an article about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Specific relationship. I think the big difference is the complexity and the behavioral component of social media. It's true that about radio, about movies, and before that about the printing press, people have said that, and there were fears. But the difference is this interactive part. People really self-organize. And even with these past media, there have been concerns, and some of them were actually rightfully so. So there are effects of media to public opinion, and then in the end also behavior. And what we did in this article is we tried to collect all the scientific literature, broad review article, systematically understand what are these effects, especially of social media. And we looked at all these different variables of political behavior in a systematic way, and we indeed find relatively clear directions. So, for example, social media use seems to be associated with more political participation, so like a mobilizing effect. But that's so to say on the good side. We also see slightly positive effects for political knowledge. People seem to get better informed when they use more the internet and social media. However, they also get more polarized, and populism, for example, or populists have a market advantage, it seems, in this kind of ecosystem, which, is the downside of it. So it's not good or bad, but it's clear that there are distinct effects that have a direction. And it's not that we don't know nothing, and maybe it's all overhyped fears, but actually there are things going on that are definitely important for democracy. That's why I think solving those issues on this micro level, on the design level, is super important to travel up to the macroscopic, to the democracy level.
John, do you have something to add? Because I'm going to follow up with Philip on that just after this. But again, I want to make sure that we get to hear your voice.
Certainly. Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what Philip said. And I suppose beyond that, one thing I kind of bring to the table with all of this is that there are definitely limits to what this work can accomplish. A good analogy would be it's one tool among many. Sometimes you may need some sort of sledgehammer to go in there and make these systemic changes to society and everything of that sort. Not really likely, but in this case, I think it's more of like it's more of a scalpel just to go in there and make sure that for all the sort of miscommunications that occur, that it's more of a kind of it's working at one layer, I suppose.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'm addressing the question correctly.
Yeah. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So, Philip, you wrote a paper on micro-targeting and this idea of people's ability to detect micro-targeted advertising. And so when you were talking about, how social media is different, where my head was kind of going with this was also the ability for these large organizations to now take behavioral science insights and target those at a very specific, almost individualistic perspective, which you talked about the printing press and radio and all those other things that, we haven't had that power before. Is that also one of the key things in your mind of how the importance of making sure that we at least explore this and look and think about this and figure out ways to overcome some of these limitations?
Absolutely. So we call this the asymmetry of knowledge or power between the platform and the users. And of course, a lack of transparency about all those targeting practices that go on. So they know much about us. We know very little about what they know, so to say. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, it depends on your interpretation of what the public sphere should look like. But in my interpretation, transparency is, so to say, a precondition for a public conversation where everybody is on eye level. And in this case, at least in the commercial realization of the current platforms, this, of course, also leads to exploitative relationships because, then there is a business model behind all the platforms. And if they know so much about us, they will use it for that. And I think the effects on democracy, the ones that I was just talking about, like these behavioral effects, they're not intended in that sense, but they're like, they are collateral damage that happens from this rather goal-oriented way of platforms working for profit.
So you're not necessarily talking about a Cambridge Analytica type approach. That's like, all right, we are trying to divide and to create this division because we think that it's going to promote our candidate above and beyond and engage people in a way that isn't. You're just saying that there's just in general the very nature of this has some collateral damage to creating some of those divisions.
I would say that's definitely what we're currently seeing. The effectiveness of Cambridge Analytica is debated, but that's, of course, another danger. Absolutely. I mean, at the moment, this data and this information falls into political hands and in interest, which is certainly already the case, especially in the US, where targeting in political domains is already for some time practice. And here it becomes more and more fashionable, is absolutely dangerous. And our studies where we try to protect people from micro-targeting, or at least make them see through this pattern, and of course, the main application is to see through, especially political advertisement that's targeted on towards your like weaknesses or fears and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, where do we go with that, right? How do we? What does the Prosocial Design Network have to say about how to deal with things like that?
I mean, John, you can also jump in, but I think if you think about transparency in also the micro-targeting domain, then design can also go a long way, because transparency is not just transparency. Just you know that from consent forms, cookie banners, where you can actually put a lot of information on the screen, but you are not really providing actual transparency. So I think behavioral science and prosocial design is definitely important to make transparency meaningful.
Yeah, John.
John, add to that.
Yeah, I suppose where the Prosocial Design Network kind of fits into all of that is since a lot of the political conversations now are happening on social media, it definitely makes sense to have these sorts of interventions in place to help humanize the other side of the argument whenever there are these sorts of debates or conversations happening, and making sure that people can kind of, if they're going to approach one another on these political conversations, that there's some mutual understanding between all parties, and that it's not going to escalate in sort of a kind of the weird dehumanization cycles you see online. I mean, for the sake of example, I mean, I grew up basically in a fairly rural community just outside of New York City, surprisingly. You would think New York City is just like all, but no,
right.
I'm way out there on Long Island. But I happen to be very much progressive Democrat, just for a number of reasons, son of 2 art teachers, all that good stuff. But as much as I identify as that, I grew up around a lot of, folks that identify as Republican, and I don't, how do I phrase this tactfully? While I do have political disagreements, like I don't actively want to, hate my neighbors over this sort of stuff. And yet you see that sort of escalation of rhetoric happening, and it's not a happy thought to think, okay, do I have to worry if my neighbors are going to, turn on me over this stuff? That's like the extreme side of the take on it. But since all these conversations are happening online and there's this escalation component, okay, how do we see? I mean, we're kind of to some extent seeing it kind of coming down the road. It's like, okay, we have all this literature here about conflict resolution and design and how they sort of intersect with nudge theory, everything else. How do we prevent that, and how do we ensure, like, okay, we're going to have disagreements, we're going to have things that come into cross purposes with each other, different sort of stances. How do we navigate these so they're mutually beneficial and that, like, we can go forward from here? And if we can't come to agreement, if they're mutually exclusive stances, how can we accept that and even work from there, even though it's like, okay, we have these disagreements, but we're still neighbors, we're still fellow Americans, or whichever country. And then how do we work from there? So that's really, when it comes to democracy and those key points, I would say that's the big crux of the Prosocial Design Network set. And then there's also sort of the other side of it, which is, in order for us to do our work, it requires a democratic sort of understanding of things, just given that a lot of science requires us to follow thoughts wherever they lead and come back and be like, okay, here's what I found. If you have a non-democratic approach to that, where it's like you have to, cook the books and come back with results that match the narrative, that's not great. And you're not going to get the best data out of that. So that's really a major reason why we've kind of thrown our hand into the ring of democracy, as it were. I love that. Other more intrinsic benefits of it's not authoritarianism. But.
Yeah. I love that. So one of the things that I found really interesting is on your website, you have a full list of interventions that you guys are looking at. And just out of curiosity, because we all do. I mean, as much as we say we love all our children the same, we have favorites, right? Do you have a favorite intervention out of the ones that you've seen there, or maybe a few that you go, these are the ones that I kind of really like, and I hope to your point, you don't want to cook the books on them, but you're hoping that they're going to show through.
I'll leave this to Philip for now, just because I'm incredibly biased on all this, because I'm the one who practiced the website. So like all the designs, everything you see before you, like that was me designing.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, let's put Philip on the hot seat.
Yeah. That's good. That's fine. My favorite interventions are the ones that are, as independent of the content itself, like not those warning labels, fact checks. I think they are all important and necessary, but they have scaling problems. And also there's this trust issue. I think friction interventions are nice because it slows down all this process, and it's somehow the counterpart of frictionless design that I think most platforms strive for, to keep us engaged and keep us on the screens. And it's kind of the counter movement, and it's quite neutral. I like this one. And I like all the interventions that empower people to know more about where they are in the network, who they are talking to, why they see certain posts and why others not. And that gives them more control. Like all those empowering ones I really like, because that shifts power not to the lawmaker or to the fact checkers or to the platforms, but they have enough already, but to the people, to really the users. And I think we can trust people that if they have good information and they can navigate and orientate, then I trust people at least, that then also conversations become more civil and
interesting. Because I just, in my quick peruse, so Philip, the slowdown modes, I thought that one was, I'm like, that's pretty cool. I think that to your point, some of that friction piece. But I also, I like the thank you button. I was like what a simple kind of thing that could be really, and I'm thinking from a human interaction, behavioral science kind of perspective, going, all right, so you're already putting that thank you, that gratitude kind of piece out, and does that reciprocate? And I'd like to see how that kind of works. And then I just thought that was fun was email to troll suggesting their account has been hacked. This idea, and I'm not sure how that would work, but I just thought interesting concept. So
yeah, that one I'm trying to remember. I don't think we ever got the name of the site that did that, but Christian Crumlish, who involved with our work to some extent, and he wrote several books on this topic. I think it's called Design Patterns. It's from the 2000s. Anyway, he pointed that one out to us in terms of a possible intervention. And you're right, there may be some significant drawbacks to having that. That said, in terms of the ones I'm of the list, that we have, I do like the one that I agree with. Thank you button is a really nice one. And the other one is the show content reach and number of views, which I believe Twitter actually is starting to do that. I don't think that's something necessarily they've done because we saw this on the Prosocial Design Network. If they did, great.
Well, yeah, take credit. What the hell?
Yeah, if they did, great. Although I do want to, out of habit, I just hedge on everything. That said, there are some.
May I jump in on this?
Yeah.
Just quickly, because those are two super cool examples from what I mean. That both thank you buttons give you more types of interaction, so it empowers us. And this other gives us more information about what is the base rate of people who saw this post. So both things would be empowering interventions in my view. Specific examples for that.
Who is using slowdown modes in a way that you think are replicable and good?
Discord. They're the ones that definitely, they use slowdown modes where it's more of a moderation tool they employ for different channels, but folks who are moderators can, for a given channel say, okay, you can only post X amount of times in X amount of minutes or what have you. That prevents things from just being walls of spam and everything of that sort.
Yeah.
Discord is interesting. It's known for having a lot of, let's be polite and call them issues, but that said, that's one area where I think they're doing well. Whether or not it's one of those ratings it's only rated as imprints. So that probably needs more research to see how effective it is, but it's promising, I would say.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of was it Josh Turnbull, his Reddit site on how to change your mind.
Yep.
And his requirement was your post. If you wanted to contradict, you couldn't be supportive of the previous post. You could only add something that would help illuminate or clarify, but you couldn't just add on and pile on and pile on and pile on with whatever. Every other post had to be sort of an opposite argument. And then after a while, it's like, well, I guess they've all been said. Mm-hmm. And so here we are with 13 lines of opposing ideas, but we only got exposed to those 13 ideas, and we don't have hundreds and thousands of posts reiterating the same message over and over and over again. Cal Turnbull, that was it.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
absolutely correct. This is Change My View is a very nice example, and what you described would be a measure for deliberative quality in the scientific sense, so to say, where arguments are reacted to and new arguments are brought up. But it's, as you say, not like piling up or trying to overburden the one side with many arguments for the same point. So that is actually a quality criteria that you could implement by design in such forums.
Yeah, I like it. What is the obligation of behavioral scientists? We study why people do what they do. And so what is the obligation of behavioral scientists when they're working in conjunction with designers in this area? Are there ethical things that we need? Is there a hard line in the sand that needs to be drawn at certain areas? What are you guys' thoughts on some of those ethical components?
Maybe quickly from my side, I think in this particular domain, our obligations is to become a counterweight to all the behavioral scientists that work for Facebook and the other companies.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, we are not many and not as well paid and so on, but I think that's the distinction is in the end not much. It's maybe the IRB board, like the ethical approval that we need for what we do. But other than that, of course, I mean, this is all not clear cut but I think that if the public sector, so to say, also is worried about those issues, we have to build up this expertise on that side. We have to learn how to analyze social media data and how to design platforms for other purposes than what they are currently designed for. And that's the counterweight we can start building up. But of course, this takes some time and money and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting. You what kind of spurred my thought there when you were talking about that, Philip, is Nuriel, who wrote, Hooked, right? And invariably he said he wrote that for this idea of helping people to overcome some of these things that are built into products and different things. And yet it became kind of this Bible for how to design, products and services to get people hooked using the behavioral science piece of it. And so it's an interesting conundrum. The research that we do and how it gets applied sometimes is out of our hands, and that makes it difficult.
Absolutely, we hit that barrier sometimes, and also Mikhail Kosinski about the Cambridge Analytica topic was a similar case. He said he just developed the method and then it was used for those purposes. We cannot protect fully from that, but what we can do is when we develop interventions, we can think about how can they misused, and then think if they can be easily misused, maybe the intervention is not so good. Like that's what I mean why I like empowering interventions more, because when you empower people truly, then it's difficult to be fully misused in order to manipulate them. Of course, other things like nudges that can be more paternalistic and less empowering, they can be used for both sides or all sides. I mean, there are not two, but many sides. That's why I like the empowering interventions most.
I love that. John, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, albeit with more of a anecdote, since you mentioned Uriel. He actually plays a interesting part in sort of what led to prosocial design happening. Just because there was a conference I had attended in mid 2019 at BetaWorks in New York City. Uriel was there, Tristan Harris was there, Ellie Pariser was there. A lot of the big names in the humane tech space. But one part that really stands out to me from that whole experience, which was fantastic, was Near Isle at one point, was saying, yeah, anyone who says like, oh, tech is addictive or whatever, they don't know what they're talking about. And he sort of is going on this, I don't want to say tirade, but it's, kind of I guess, manifesto of some sort. But on the one hand, you had him saying that. You had other scientists saying the exact opposite thing of like, oh, tech is addictive. And of course, Tristan Harris is there saying it does all these things to your brain. Like, what are you talking about? And of course, when Uriel said that, I was like, I think my exact thinking was like, oh man, this is going to be a Jerry Springer sort of thing, isn't it? With people throwing but
chaos coming.
But no, what was great with it was having all those conflicting points, and it really helped me sort of realize there may be a need to get through all the different data points, be like, okay, what makes sense in the middle of all this? And there was another, I don't want to name names in terms of the person pitching this product, but suffice to say, it was this idea of like, you'll have this, his whole product idea was having a website that would, through reading your facial muscles, change the color of your screen to help induce certain moods. That was sort of the idea with it. And I, of course, thought it was a terrible idea for a number of reasons. One being surveillance, the other being there probably are sufficient behavioral science cues out there to be like, want to make your users behave a certain way. That could be, and that sort of questioning, of course, led to a couple months later, me sitting down with Joel over coffee and being like, okay, there's a lot of data here. There's a lot to work with here. Let's see if we can make something out of it.
Yeah. That story reminds me, Tim and I actually had a similar kind of situation. We were out in San Francisco at a behavioral science marketing conference, and one person took us aside at the happy hour and was just explaining this new, system that they had that was basically micro targeting people in San Francisco, ads based on the weather and then some personal information that they could glean. So if it was, 72 degrees and they knew that, all right, at 72 degrees, Kurt likes to buy, beer because we've seen that in his past thing. We're going to give him an advertisement to buy beer. But Tim doesn't buy it until it gets to 80 degrees. So he's going to get a whole different advertisement just based on geolocation, weather patterns, and, a whole history of things. And they're going, how great is this? And I'm going, this is horrible. This seems like it's
a little bit much.
Yeah. Creepy, verging on creepy.
Yeah. Very, very creepy. So
if you guys don't mind, I'm curious. I love that we have two guests on different continents right now. And I'd like to just ask, what's on your playlist? What do you like to listen to these days? What are the musicians or tracks or types of music that you're listening to?
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I can start with this one. So probably my favorite song right at the moment, it's a bit old, I guess. It's Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears.
Yeah.
It always puts me in a great mood. I really love that sort of synthy sort of 80s vibe. And of course, growing up as a kid in the 90s, it's like, I remember very fondly listening to that song, like going over, I think on a road trip, we're going over the Throgs Neck Bridge, and just hearing that is sort of like one of those core memories that just stick with you. Other than that, I went to SUNY Purchase, which is very much a musical school, or just an art school in general.
Right.
And I had the privilege of being with a lot of up and coming artists, and it's sort of surreal now looking back. There's Ty Sunderland is one. He's a DJ. He does all sorts of parties on boats out on the East River, and they're quite well known in the New York scene. When I was in college, I think I booked him. I booked him for an event to promote our student government elections. So it's like, oh yeah,
let's get Ty.
Yeah. Then there's Kat Cunning, who she was an extra on the Deuces recently, but she has a really promising musical career. She's just phenomenal. And I had poetry classes with her. When I remember, we were talking at one point about like Tolkien and like kind of the rhythm he has in J.R.R. Tolkien's work of like ringing bells and kind of the kind of quality of anvils and stuff in The Hobbit. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast.
That works great. That was great. Philip, go ahead.
Yeah, since I'm living in Berlin, so I listen to a mixture of techno and hip hop, and I don't know.
Nice.
I would say for work, I like to listen to some eternal techno from the Berlin clubs. They have great labels, most of them, and you can listen to that on SoundCloud. And yeah, my kids, they like hip hop, and I listen to Pasha. He's a young Berlin hip hop artist, really cool German rap. If you want to learn German or listen to that,
cool.
You can have a listen. Really, yeah, that's what I'm currently up to.
Excellent. And you kind of intimated this, but you actually listen to techno while you're working?
Yeah, it depends on the task, of course. But if it's a bit, for coding and data analysis, and you want to deep dive into the code, then it helps actually. Me at least.
Yeah, we asked that a number of people, and there's different perspectives on that, but it often is on those kind of where it's just a not a routine kind of thing where music helps in doing that. And John, I just have to say, Tears for Fears is fantastic. They just have a new album out. If people haven't listened to it, the first two songs are awesome. The rest of the album, in my mind, is not so great, but maybe it'll grow on me. But the first two songs are outstanding. So
they're back together in a really good way, as far as I'm concerned, too. Yeah. John and Philip, thank you both so much for being guests on Behavioral Grooves. We are grateful for your time, and thank you for all of the challenges that we had to overcome to get here. But it's really great to have you as guests.
And then, John, if anybody wanted to support or to contribute, because I know you had ways to suggest, how can they support the Prosocial Design Network?
Certainly. So the best way, there's our website, www.prosocialdesign.org. They can go there. They can, if they're able to, they can donate. If they want to get more involved, there's our Slack channel. They can sign up. In a couple of days, we'll get back to them and let them aboard, and especially in terms of folks that can sort of get into the weeds of things and help us sort of continue to grow and deliver really fantastic interventions. I think that's probably the best way they can help.
Fantastic. Cool. And I know many of our listeners out there, this is an important piece. And so definitely reach out and check out the website. It's cool. And there are lots of, you're looking for input and different insights. So really encourage any of our listeners to go out and do that.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Thank you very much. Great questions. Great conversation.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I groove on what we learned from our discussion with John and Philipp, have a free-flowing conversation, and talk about whatever else comes into our prosocial brains.
Yeah. What did Bill von Hippel call us? That we're the hyper-social? We're hyper-social animals?
Oh, I thought you were talking about you and me. Like we're hyper.
No.
Oh my God. What did Bill say about us? I don't remember that.
Well, we humans, we're just super social, and we need social connections. And
which is really interesting, because to the point that, as you talked about, we evolved to be social creatures. We have this need to belong, to fit in. But along with that, there's that dark side of things, this idea that we have in-group and out-group. And if you are in the in-group, you're great. But if you're in the out-group, you are the enemy. You are evil incarnate, and all of those factors that come into play.
Yeah. And my observation of social media in the last couple of years, where I've really been paying attention to it, is the echo chamber. So much of the commentaries in social media are really just echo chamber kinds of things. They're just doubling down on negativity or complaints or problems that they see, conspiracy theories, all those kinds of things. And it's very, very hard to see any kind of actual conversation. And I think this gets back to John and Philipp's design issue, is that it wasn't designed to actually facilitate a healthy exchange.
Well, I think the intent was there, right? As we said in the intro, it's this unfulfilled promise of what this could have been. Yes. And I think what happened is that the people who designed this weren't necessarily behavioral scientists or psychologists. And so they weren't thinking about how human behavior and bad actors come into play and what that entails then for this. So we're doing this grooving session a week after Elon Musk just took over Twitter. And so there's been a whole bunch of information coming out about the toxicity of Twitter and the negative and misinformation and all those factors that come into play. And it's really interesting because the guy who invented the retweet, basically, right, that you can just retweet something, now disavows that, says that was the worst thing that could have ever happened because of the negative impact that has. Because what gets shared? It's not that, wow, this is great, this is wonderful. No, what gets shared is the negative pieces, are the shocking, so what do people do if you want to get a lot of followers, if you want to get things? Well, you go out on the edges and you don't stay in the middle. And that, I think, is again, a misstep when we think about how things are designed. We know that from a human nature perspective, and yet it's not taken into account.
Yeah, not enough cuddly puppies. Let me just put it that way. Yeah.
Okay, so we have cuddly puppies. Those are drawing our attention too, right? We have cuddly puppies on one side. We have toxic misinformation that is driving, all of these conspiracy theories and other things on the other side. What we're missing in the middle is nuanced conversation.
Right. Maybe we can move from the editorial into exactly what John and Philipp were talking about, and that really is this wonderful idea of how can they redesign the social fabric so that it's more civil, so that it has a built-in pro-social side to it. And I think that's a really cool question to ask.
Yeah. And so listeners, I would encourage you to go out and just look the Prosocial Design Network. And we'll have a link for that in the show notes, because they have a number of different things that they're testing. And this is the wonderful part about this that I love, is that they're looking at these and then they're testing them and they're saying, does this work? Does this not work? And things like the slow down button, thank you button, the element of, if to send a message back to trolls to say, oh, your account must have gotten hacked because you obviously wouldn't be saying something so crazy like this. And those are all things that are being tested and checked out to say, will this reduce the amount of negativity and the trolling and all of the misinformation that's out there?
Yeah. I'd also like to just say they're not the first ones. They're doing great work. And but I go back to, I think it was episode 10 when we talked to Cal Turnbull of the Change My Mind Reddit group. And he quoted his grandfather. I think of this all the time, Kurt. I just think that his grandfather said, one begins with a judgment and ends with a judgment. And the purpose of facts and figures is to come in between them and make the one at the end that the opinion that the judgment that you come out with at the end more accurate. Not just feel better, but more accurate. Like let's invest in life in such a way that we're actually trying to get better at it.
Which is
incremental things.
Which is what Cal was trying to do with that whole component of the subreddit that he has, change my view, change my mind. Oh my gosh, we should know this.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
as we mentioned, we're old. We forget about these
300 episodes later. Yeah.
So but I think there is this aspect where we can look at the value that social media, that the internet has provided, and it's a ton. I mean, you look at the connections that we made. Just again, Cal Turnbull. We would have never met Fadi Maki or Rob Burnett out of, the Middle East and Africa. And we're connected with them. We've met Fadi face to face now because of connections from social media. I mean, you can look across the globe and the connections that we have. much less like some of the even local connections that we have that we would never have gotten outside of, some of the elements of here.
It's true. I mean, it's funny. Even people in the city where we lived, we wouldn't have met them if it wasn't for social media.
Yeah,
but,
you met Christina Gravert because we got her on the show because you were having a Twitter exchange with her, right?
Yes. Yeah. And found she was incredibly fascinating and bright. And it's always great to talk to Christina. But and all these people that you're mentioning are doing very positive pro-social work. They're,
right.
Along Channing Jang and Johannes Haushofer from the Busara Center.
There you go.
Those guys too, tremendously powerful pro-social work, and it's really, really great to have it. And we need to have these people in the world, if nothing else, than to counterbalance the bad actors, because they're out there. But it's also the way that our social media is designed right now. It sort of draws out the bad actor aspect of who we are. It allows us to indulge in the bad actor experience in not such a good way. And it makes it easy for us. Twitter has reduced the friction for us to be bad, to be nasty, to be naughty, to complain, and almost made it harder to be nice. There aren't a lot of good reasons to say thank you or to have a wait a minute. Are you really sure about that? Or what's your point about that? Or to have some kind of a civil discourse that doesn't really exist well today.
Well, and we talked about this with some of the conspiracy theorists researchers that we had on, this idea that one of the things that internet allows is that crazy conspiracy theorist who was on the corner that everybody socially shunned in real life, and it was one person in a town or maybe two in a city and 10 in a bigger city, right? All of a sudden, they get online and those 1s, 2s, 10s add up to tens of thousands around the globe. And all of a sudden that person who was kind of ostracized and the out group, the person who that's crazy, now social proof comes in and you're going, there's 30. So that person who's walking by and goes, is that really true? And you're going, no, that's just Crazy Joe on the corner. Well, Crazy Joe has 10,000, 20,000 friends. And so maybe Crazy Joe isn't so crazy anymore. And it's a reinforcing loop. And those are the pieces where you kind of go, no, it's still Crazy Joe. There's just 10,000 Crazy Joes, right? We got 7 billion plus people in the world. There's a bunch of crazy people, and the rest of us who aren't crazy need to understand that.
But we give in, right? We get soft around that because it's like, there are 10,000 Crazy Joes out there. Maybe they are onto something.
Exactly, and that's our human nature, right? That's understanding social proof and and those elements of what comes into play. I do think that what John and Philipp are trying to do is something that is of vital importance, though. Yes. And I think that is a positive. And I think we all can be part of that. I love the fact that the behavioral science community has a powerful and strong presence on social media.
Yeah.
And that's where we met all these other people. And it's positive. It's bringing research to out that we would have never gotten. It's introducing us to people and to different areas beyond the weird, people that I would normally know of. And it even brings us closer to researchers at home. But it's that community. And that's what is powerful about the internet. And it's like making sure that we build it so that those positive communities can really flourish.
Yeah. I'd like to say one other thing about John and Philipp, and of course, Joel, who is a co-founder who we did not get to talk to. But, they're not Pollyannish dreamers. They're not just these sort of blue-eyed, oh my gosh, life is so great and everybody should join in our, love the world and hug everybody. These guys, they believe in a better world and they're using science to get there, hard science. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just respect that a lot and really I'm grateful that we got to talk to them.
Yeah. What do you think? The wrap on that one?
Yep,
I think we should wrap this episode up.
Let's wrap it. And by the way, I just want to say I'm hopeful that this initiative will help get things started to create a better design and have a better social media experience for people in the future.
Yeah, me too. And if you're interested in helping out or have ideas that you think should be tested, check out the Prosocial Design Network. And again, you can find that link in the show notes.
Absolutely. And so with that, we hope that this week you take this information from Joel and Philipp and this little bit of conversation from Kurt and I, and it helps you to go out and find your groove.
Your social groove.